class number 4. We're on risk-taking women part 2, or part duh. Isn't that how it goes? So we are starting. Oh, wait, before we start, why don't we open with prayer? Let me pray. Heavenly Father, we are grateful that you're present here with us, and we are grateful that you continue to teach us, that we can continue to learn from you, and how exciting that is. There's always more. We could never, our little brains could never contain all that you have for us. And we welcome you into this room and into our hearts and into our brains. Thank you, Lord. I pray that you would be with us today as we discuss these risk-taking women, and that you would open our minds to new things. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So our first person this morning is Abigail. And since Abigail is a little less known, I'd like to go through the passage with her. So is there someone here who would like to read this? It is very long. Thank you, Bella.
Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him at his home in Ramah. Then David moved down into the desert of Paran. A certain man in Maon, who had property there at Carmel, was very wealthy. He had 1,000 goats and 3,000 sheep, which he was shearing in Carmel. His name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. She was an intelligent and beautiful woman, but her husband was surly and mean in his dealings. He was a Calebite. While David was in the wilderness, he heard that Nabal was shearing sheep. So he sent 10 young men and said to them, "Go up to Nabal at Carmel and greet him in my name. Say to him, 'Long life to you, good health to you and your household, and good health to all that is yours. Now I hear that it is sheep shearing time. When your shepherds were with us, we did not mistreat them, and the whole time they were at Carmel, nothing of theirs was missing. Ask your own servants, and they will tell you. Therefore be favorable toward my men, since we come at a festive time. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can find for them.' Nabal answered David's servants, 'Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where?' David's men turned around and went back. When they arrived, they reported every word. David said to his men, 'Each of you strap on your sword.' So they did, and David strapped his on as well. About 400 men went up with David, while 200 stayed with the supplies. One of the servants told Abigail, Nabal's wife, 'David sent messengers from the wilderness to give our master his greetings, but he hurled insults at them. Yet these men were very good to us. They did not mistreat us, and the whole time we were out in the fields near them, nothing was missing. Night and day they were a wall around us the whole time we were herding our sheep near them. Now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him.' Abigail acted quickly. She took 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of roasted grain, and 100 cakes of raisins and 200 cakes of pressed figs, and loaded them on donkeys. Then she told her servants, 'Go on ahead, I'll follow you.' But she did not tell her husband, Nabal. As she came riding her donkey into a mountain ravine, there were David and his men descending toward her, and she met them. David had just said, 'It's been useless, all my watching over this fellow's property in the wilderness so that nothing of his was missing. He has paid me back evil for good. May God deal with David, be it ever so severely, if by morning I leave alive one male of all who belong to him.' When Abigail saw David, she quickly got off her donkey and bowed down before David with her face to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, 'Pardon your servant, my lord, and let me speak to you. Hear what your servant has to say. Please pay no attention, my lord, to that wicked man Nabal. He is just like his name. His name means fool, and folly goes with him. And as for me, your servant, I did not see the men my lord sent. And now, my lord, as surely as the Lord your God lives, and as you live, since the Lord has kept you from bloodshed and from avenging yourself with your own hands, may your enemies and all who are intent on harming my Lord be like Nabal. And let this gift, which your servant has brought to my Lord, be given to the men who follow you. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord your God will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling. When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant. David said to Abigail, Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, who has sent you today to meet me. May you be blessed for your good judgment, and for keeping me from bloodshed this day, and from avenging myself with my own hands. Otherwise, as surely as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, who has kept me from harming you, if you had not come quickly to meet me, not one male belonging to Nabal would have been left alive by daybreak. Then David accepted from her hand what she had brought him and said, Go home in peace. I have heard your words and granted your request. When Abigail went to Nabal, he was in the house holding a banquet like that of a king. He was in high spirits and very drunk. So she told him nothing at all until daybreak. Then in the morning, when Nabal was sober, his wife told him all these things, and his heart failed him, and he became like stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal, and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, Praise be to the Lord, who has upheld my cause against Nabal for treating me with contempt. He has kept his servant from doing wrong, and has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head. Then David sent word to Abigail, asking her to become his wife. His servants went to Carmel and said to Abigail, David has sent us to you to take you to become his wife. She bowed down with her face to the ground and said, I am your servant and am ready to serve you and wash the feet of my Lord's servants. Abigail quickly got on a donkey and, attended by her 5 female servants, went with David's messengers and became his wife.
And they all lived happily ever after.
What could go wrong?
So Abigail, she was beautiful and intelligent and charming and pious, and she was married to a jerk. Yikes.
She was wise.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Now, David wasn't king yet. He was an outlaw at this point because King Saul hated him, and he had to run away from him. And King Saul knew that David was going to be king one day, and he didn't like that idea. So David lived in the hills, like it says here, with his loyal band of 600 or so followers. And, of course, he needed food at this point. And it was shearing time, so time for food. So he sent a request to Nabal for help, who refused. So David threatened him. And Abigail learned about David's request and her husband's rude refusal, and unbeknownst to Nabal, acted with forethought and care and great rapidity. She was quick-witted.
Well, David too thought that it was his due to have it been fed, because he'd spent the previous season as men guarding the herd.
Yeah, and so he was helping Nabal get rich. Why wouldn't he get some share of that? Yeah, and he had done it without, like threatening him. It wasn't like, paying me protection money. It was just how things were done. So, as a Hebrew woman, Abigail was restricted by custom to give counsel only in an emergency. She really wasn't allowed to give men advice. And she risked the displeasure of her husband, frankly, by going out there. It was, a risk. So she didn't really act impulsively, I don't think. I think she was really clear-sighted that this is a problem, I think I'm the only one who can solve it, but it is a risk. And she was just in the nick of time. That was great and wise about the whole. When we have wisdom, we need to put it forth, right? We have faith to share, we need to put it forth. We have help to offer, put it out there. Don't hesitate. Abigail probably had to make amends for her husband pretty often, since she called him a fool. That's his name, that's him. So her peacemaking mission, she got the king's blessing from that, and then she didn't try to argue with David, she just said, "You're right, we were wrong, my husband was wrong, please." And then she returned home to take up her life again. Didn't think anything would change, except for that 10 days later, Nabal died. And David said to her, "May you be blessed for your good judgment and for keeping me from bloodshed." So she helped out both men. Keeping me from bloodshed and from avenging myself with my own hands, because vengeance is the Lord's, right? And he confessed that he had been wrong to get so angry. So she saved her whole household, and she saved David as well. And then, of course, David decided to marry her. Yeah, go ahead.
Now, it doesn't have to do with women per se, but the question I have, because the text is silent on it, was David, I think this would be the most horrific, was David going to kill all of the men under Nabal and then leave Nabal alive to deal with the consequences?
Ooh.
I mean, because, wow, that would be,
That would be ugly.
yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Because the text is silent, but it doesn't say that he was going to kill Nabal and all of his men. It says he was going to kill all of Nabal's men.
Wow. Yeah. I don't know. That would be vengeful, wouldn't it?
There's some nasty things in here.
Yeah.
Leave Nabal with all the women of the with all the women.
Can you go back to that passage? I thought he was gonna kill all his
Oops.
related.
All the men.
All the,
There's back another one, I think, yeah.
kept me from harming you, not
Right.
one male
I mean,
belonging,
yeah.
not one man belonging
Belonging
to
to
Nabal would
Nabal.
have been left alive.
Yeah, that's one male belonging to Nabal. It doesn't say,
Yeah, it doesn't say Nabal.
yeah.
Him himself.
Yeah.
Huh? Yeah, I just made an assumption there, just jumped to conclusion.
I mean, that would be the horror of horrors, would be to watch all of your
Yeah.
male offspring, servants,
Yeah.
workers be killed, and you have to live and deal with it.
Ooh, that David, nasty.
And many times he is.
Yeah, yeah.
In regards to what you said about Abigail, you know, not telling her husband and everything, what I noticed is that she's living after Deborah that we talked about last week.
Uh-huh.
And so there was already precedence for someone who was above her husband.
In advice giving?
Uh-huh. Because Deborah was a prophetess.
Right, and then that was before.
That was before this time.
Yeah.
I mean, they must have known the story of Deborah and Jael and all the rest.
Right.
Mhm.
Do they always follow those things though, right? It really wasn't customary.
No,
So, yeah.
but it wasn't.
It wasn't totally unheard of.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
I did read a whole commentary on this, which I have to admit that I'm totally against. Because the commentary suggestion was, well, she acted outside of, she should have told her husband immediately and then just followed his advice. And I'm thinking, how come she's praised like 3 times in this?
Oh, yeah.
If that were true. I mean, I can't see that. I can't see that she should have told somebody that she already knew to be a fool to, and knowing that he had already denied the request of David, who was...
The very first thing that we hear about her is that she's intelligent, right?
Right.
and her husband's a fool. Why should she? Why? What?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the suggestion on the commentary was that God could have worked it out another way, and I'm thinking, yeah, but he didn't.
But he didn't.
He didn't. He worked it out this way.
And she's presented as a hero,
Yeah.
right?
That's the way I see it,
Yeah.
yeah.
Nobody's saying, well, she kind of screwed up, but it worked out anyway. No.
Yeah.
No.
It's interesting that somehow through the grapevine, he didn't find out what she was doing.
Yeah, well, I
Because
think,
she should have had quite a few people went with her, because she had all those animals and food and things to carry. And
exactly, but everybody was on Team Abigail.
But everybody else was at the festival of the sheep shearing, because that was a big thing, once the sheep shearing was
Well,
done.
yeah, that's true too.
And they were drinking.
And they were drinking, and they kept on drinking, because he was very drunk.
But
Yeah.
people did come and tell
Probably
her behind his back,
Right.
right? And so, yeah, it wasn't working the other way around. People,
And about the time he could have done anything about it, he had a stroke.
yeah, true. True. Yeah. So, why is this story important? Why do we have it in the Bible?
Well, she took a risk against going by against her husband's will, which he had made very, very clear. Not to her per se, but
Yeah,
made
but-
very clear to everybody else, and everybody else was a witness to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she was going against that will, she couldn't say, I didn't know. Yeah, it was obvious.
Yeah,
And he was a jerk.
yeah. And he was a
the
jerk.
power of a woman to actually persuade David when he was already on his way with all his troops.
Mhm.
Strapping on their
Yeah.
swords.
Yeah, so with the power of her
And it's not like she.
convincing voice that,
Oh, sorry. It's not like she tried to hide it from Nabal either. She just waited until he sobered up to tell him.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, she seems very open and above board and all that good stuff, really. Yeah. So, hero. That's what I say. Hero. I like her.
I think this would have been David's first wife.
No, this was his fourth wife.
His fourth, okay. I'm kind of lost track. I mean, glad we had.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't have Michael at that point,
He
but he had the other
did,
two.
I think. I'm sorry, I don't have my Bible here with me, but can we look at, I think the last couple of verses of this chapter of,
It names the other two
Yeah.
women.
and I thought it named Michael in there too.
Nope.
All right. Because didn't she help him escape?
No.
Also?
Oh, yeah, but it says that she had been given to Patim. the
Oh,
other-
she was his wife
First,
first, yeah, and then
And then-
later she came back.
but
So,
she's not back yet.
oh, I see what you're saying. He did marry her, but you don't think that they're married.
No, because it said so. I mean, I read the whole chapter.
Yeah, I didn't read it the same way you did. That's all. But
It said she'd been given to Patim.
Right,
Yeah, no,
right.
and it just mentioned
And
the
he's-
other two women that were
Yeah.
there with him.
all right. Next, unless you have other things to say about Abigail? Anything else? Bathsheba. Now, this one, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, or make you read it, because I think Bathsheba is more familiar to us. She's kind of a mystery figure, really. She's a little bit of a Rorschach test, a little blank slate. You know, you think about Bathsheba based on probably your own projections, I feel. Because her actions aren't always explained. The interpretations, I have here in my notes, the interpretations we have of her may say more about the men who wrote those interpretations than about Bathsheba herself. Because she's just mysterious. She's introduced in the spring, at the time when the kings go off to war. David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army, and they destroyed the Ammonites, besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. So when all the soldiers went off to war, David stayed home. He sent his general Joab to lead the troops, and then one evening, or maybe after an afternoon nap or something, just because he couldn't sleep, he got up from bed, went to the roof, and he saw a woman bathing, and she was very beautiful. So that's the first thing we learned about Bathsheba. With Abigail, she's intelligent and beautiful. With Bathsheba was beautiful. But that didn't really protect her, did it? So she was performing a purification rite after menstruating. And she would have been considered ritually unclean until that sunset. So this did happen after sunset. Don't know how dark it was, but it was after sunset. And she probably thought she would be alone at that time and didn't count on observers from the palace roof, but people have interpreted this differently and think that maybe she was out there to seduce David. We don't know. Some people wonder. And even if Bathsheba was being appropriately modest and the king's actual view was limited, he knows what's taking place. He knew that she was bathing, and maybe his imagination was able to do the rest. Anyway, however that happened, David sent someone to find out about her, and Bathsheba came from a prominent family. That didn't protect her either. Her beauty didn't protect her, her prominent family didn't. And it makes it sound like David didn't know who she was. He sent somebody out to find out who she was, but Bathsheba's father and her husband have been part of David's inner circle for a very long time. Well, I guess a long time. He had 30, they were called, of select warriors. And so why wouldn't he know this woman? Anyway, but the biblical record, however, is clear that before David sent for her, he did know who she was. He asked. So this encounter wasn't an accidental, oops, I had no idea you were the wife of my friend. Bathsheba was an Israelite from the tribe of Judah. Her father was Eliam, and he is listed as one of David's elite warriors, known as the 30. We've got it right here. Among the 30 were Eliam, son of Ahithophel, the Gilonite, yeah, whatever, I don't know how to say that. And the Gilonite, Gilo was a town in Judea, and Ahithophel was one of David's counselors, who later went over to David's son Absalom during that rebellion, when Absalom conspired against David. And we know that because in 2 Samuel it says, while Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown. And so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. So one wonders if David's affair with Bathsheba offended Ahithophel so much that he went over to Absalom. And at the end of Absalom's rebellion, Ahithophel counsels Absalom to sleep with all of David's wives up on the roof, on the palace. So, that's a nice little twist right there. Bathsheba was married to Uriah the Hittite, another soldier listed among the 30, along with Eliam. Uriah was a foreigner, a Hittite, but he had converted to Judaism. His name means, the Lord is my light. So Bathsheba was the granddaughter of a trusted advisor, the daughter of an elite warrior, and the wife of another elite warrior, all of them part of David's inner circle. And so she was Israelite nobility, really. So, according to the Bible record that we have, I think that it's sort of up to us what we think of her. We have our doubts. She seems sort of passive, doesn't she? You know, David sends for her. What is she? Did she intend, do you think, to seduce David?
That's the big question. Was she up there on the roof knowing that she would be observed?
Exactly. Did she actively consent when he approached her? We don't know. Doesn't say.
Well, it doesn't,
What?
it doesn't say that he raped her. That's what, I mean.
Exactly.
And there's other instances, I mean, with his son, that,
Yeah.
that it says.
Did she feel she had no choice?
That's,
And, you know.
Was it because he was the king?
Exactly.
So she had no choice.
Yeah.
You had to do what the king asked you to do. Was that?
Seems like it. Seems like it.
The other
We
thing-
don't know if she argued or protested. We don't know if she, you know, theoretically could have been in a sense, but We don't know.
Right. The other thing we might know about her, depending on which scholars you believe about who wrote Proverbs 31,
Oh,
is most of the ones that I've read say that Lemuel is actually Solomon. That's his mother's name for him. The sayings of Proverbs 31 are all based on his mother. And
makes sense to me.
and so then if you read that in that light, then we do know quite a bit about what she believed. However, I've got it here in Spanish, so I can't, my brain can't translate it that fast, I'm sorry.
Well, not so long ago in our culture, it was okay to blame the victim, right?
Mhm.
In cases of rape, and that's why I call this kind of a Rorschach test. I have my doubts about Bathsheba too, and I imagine she had doubts about herself, because women are conditioned to take responsibility for men's reactions to them, frankly. If I don't sound too feminist here. If she didn't scheme to make this happen, she probably kicked herself for not being more aware of whether she was being observed. She may have asked herself, what if I had waited another hour? What if? Obviously, I don't have any idea what truly went through Bathsheba's mind, but perhaps David didn't either. Yeah.
Remember, she was up on the roof, so we all have mirror doors, right?
Mhm.
You know, that's usually typically the third story.
Mhm.
It takes a lot of work. You have to have your servants bring the warm water up. I mean, it's a very deliberate act. It's not like we're going to turn on the bathtub, you know. It was a very deliberate act to choose where she was going to bathe, and it was a very inconvenient place.
I would think that would be the place to bathe, because then you can just toss the water out over the side. And it was also springtime, remember? Because that was when all this happened, because he didn't
Yeah.
go out because,
Yeah, he should have been out to work.
yeah, he should have been out to work, but he wasn't out to work, so.
Well, what we do know for sure is that after it was over, she went home, and David didn't send for her again. But when she learned she had conceived, she sent him this brief message, I'm pregnant. So, again, kind of passive. David is active. Bathsheba leaves the next step up to him, and they both knew that the law required the death penalty for both of them. So David went into action. First he tries to cover up by bringing Uriah home to sleep with his wife, and when that didn't work, he has Uriah murdered. David did a lot, and everything he chose to do was wrong. So many people knew what was going on, except for Uriah. David feels he's untouchable. He's literally shameless about the whole thing. Yeah.
Well, he didn't seem to think that anybody knew about it when obviously all of his servants knew about it. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like, why wouldn't they know? But
Yeah.
like they're sworn to secrecy or something, I'm not quite
guess.
sure.
Or loyalty or something, yeah. When people get a lot of power, that's a temptation. They use it for their own benefit and feel little or no guilt or remorse, it appears. And I just want to throw in there, this has nothing to do with Bathsheba, but contrast that with what Jesus said about himself and his power. He said, for even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. That's the thing. Power corrupts when it's given to us. So
We
we
don't know his motivation for not joining his army, which would be very rare, I would think. Maybe he stayed back to seduce her, who knows?
Yeah. Wow. Thought of that. Yeah, he does deserve a little bit of something for that.
Culpability.
Culpability, that's the word. Thank you.
Well, it seems like it gives you a lot more interest in Uriah too, because he went out with his men, and not only that, when he came back with his men, he wanted to stay with them outside the wall. He wouldn't go inside the wall where he'd be comfortable and sleep with his wife.
Right.
You're absolutely right.
And
That's
so
a
he was
huge contrast,
loyal
isn't
to
it?
his men, where David was not loyal. He was not loyal to his friend
Exactly.
or to his troops either.
Right.
So
Right.
he wasn't all that great a guy at that point.
Yeah. I mean, we all love David, but wow, he committed adultery and murder and the sin of pride.
Disloyalty.
And adultery.
Yeah, I said that first, adultery, murder, and pride. Okay, yeah. So, when Uriah died, what did Bathsheba do? She mourned. But presumably this mourning period only lasted 7 days. That's the strict period of mourning. Could have possibly been up to 3 weeks. Then David had her brought to his house, he married her, and she bore him a son. Of course, Bathsheba would realize that Uriah's death got her out of a very tough situation. And again, the guilt and the what ifs probably made her mourning even more difficult, I would think. Was she happy about living in the palace? We don't know. Was that her goal? We don't know.
So why is she a risk taker?
That was my question too.
That comes later, but yeah, I'm not sure she is. I put her in this category and then I'm like, But she does take a risk at the end for her son Solomon. But it's not I mean, she's trying to save her own life, right? So maybe it isn't.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You used, okay, here's the basic question. David had all this power and probably not a whole lot of guilt. She had no power and lots of guilt. Like, are we all like, do you think we're all like that? Do you think,
No.
does it work even now? The more power I have, the less guilt I have about something that I may have done wrong.
I
By power of the
can't answer that
situation.
generally. I do see it. You do see that in people. I think there was this is many, many years ago, a Republican senator who was a really good guy, Mark Hatfield. Remember that? And he got caught taking presents and not declaring them. And you're like, Mark Hatfield, why would you need to do that? And I'm thinking that probably it was just one of those things that, well, it's me, I'm a good guy, so it's not wrong. We tend to do that. We justify ourselves when we're able to. Yeah.
Just as the role of senior pastor for over a decade and a half, how many times did I hear people tell me, well, what is grace for if not something like this?
Oh, wow, yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but self-justification is a powerful thing.
Yeah.
Powerful thing. Yeah.
And those were always issues of adultery.
Oh, is that right?
Every single one.
Oh, sad.
I can see that, yeah.
Because it's love. It's wonderful.
Yeah. Don't I deserve love? Yeah. So, yeah, the guilt. I wonder if she worried about what people would think about her rushed marriage and that very early baby. Maybe she cultivated this protective shell around herself. So maybe that's part of why we know so little about her feelings. I don't know. So it wasn't long before the prophet Nathan confronted David with his horrific sin. And David repented. Now, according to Nathan, Bathsheba didn't need to repent.
Right.
So that tells you something, I think, because Nathan really did have the mind of God, Nathan told David, the Lord has taken away your sin because you repented. You are not going to die, but because by doing this you have shown utter contempt for the Lord, the son born to you will die. That's quite the punishment. God forgave David, but still took the life of his son. The baby died 7 days after Nathan left. And if that was 7 days after the child was born, then he was still uncircumcised and therefore unnamed. So,
Yeah.
Not a Hebrew.
We don't have a name for him.
Nope.
Yeah, he wouldn't have been considered a Hebrew, a true Hebrew, part of the covenant.
But it does say that, but David does say, he
Mhm.
cannot come back to me, but I will go to him.
Yeah, he does.
Mhm.
We're told nothing about Bathsheba's need to confess and repent, so I think she was sinned against rather than a sinner. That's,
That would make sense with Proverbs 31.
yeah, yeah. It's all, it's still speculation.
Yeah.
And then God's grace really comes through. But Bathsheba allowed herself to be comforted. David comforted his wife Bathsheba, and he went to her and made love to her. She gave birth to a son. They named him Solomon. The Lord loved him, and because the Lord loved him, he sent word through Nathan the prophet to name him Jedediah. So he's got two names, Solomon and Jedediah, and Lemuel, right? And so David, who had been so selfish at the beginning of this story, shows his caring side and comforts her. He had wept and fasted. He had asked God to spare his child's life. And now he knows Bathsheba is truly in mourning, and he comforts her. And it's not just any child that he gives them. It's King Solomon, who would carry on David's dynasty. Solomon means peaceful. Jedediah means loved by Yahweh. Bathsheba needed comfort, and God gave her Solomon. Sometimes we need comfort and we don't accept it. We may feel that this isn't the comfort we really wanted, or I want my past life back, things like that. I want a different kind of life. We don't recognize that God's comfort is best. Bathsheba wasn't too proud or too jaded or too blinded by old expectations to reject God or David's comfort. She gave birth to 3 more sons, Shemaiah, Shobab, and Nathan. What? She named her 4th child Nathan. I think that's wonderful. Clearly David didn't resent Nathan for calling him out on his sin. Yay, David. Keep going, David.
And great hot dogs.
Yeah, there's that too. And by the way, this baby Nathan is found in Luke's genealogy of Jesus.
Right.
Bathsheba brought up her sons very well. And of course, Solomon's wisdom is legendary. He collected the words in the book of Proverbs. And Bathsheba doesn't turn up in the story again until David nears death and Solomon is grown. And at this point, she stands up for herself and her son. And who shows up with her? Nathan the prophet. So David has had this tumultuous life since the whole Bathsheba episode began. That was kind of the beginning of the end in a sense. He had 19 sons total, and who knows how many daughters? A few of the sons are jerks. One raped his own sister. Absalom killed that brother, and then he rebelled against David and attempted a coup. Absalom was killed by Joab, David's chief general, his bestie. At this point in his life, while he's getting weak and perhaps dying, David's son Adonijah decides to crown himself king, which is pretty cheeky. And one of the people Adonijah tried to enlist in this was Nathan the prophet. And here's where it gets really interesting. Nathan didn't go to David with the information. He went to Bathsheba. Oops. Then Nathan asked Bathsheba, Solomon's mother, "Have you not heard that Adonijah, the son of Haggith, sorry, got a little cursive right there, over my thing, has become king, and our Lord David knows nothing about it. Now then, let me advise you how you can save your own life and the life of your son Solomon. Go into King David and say to him, 'My lord the king, did you not swear to me, your servant, surely Solomon, your son, shall be king after me, and he will sit on my throne? Why then has Adonijah become king? While you are still there talking to the king, I will come in and add my word to what you have said.'" So Nathan and Bathsheba have become allies over the years, maybe even friends. And Bathsheba did just exactly what Nathan told her to. And she bowed down before David, pled with David to put Solomon on the throne. And there are, again, different ways of looking at this. Was she being self-centered, power-hungry? Or was she simply afraid for her life? Or was she thinking, this is the right thing to do?
It was promised earlier.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah. She was just reminding him.
And it seems like from the text, because it does, it's an argument of silence, but the text tells you what you need to know. That her primary concern was to take care of her son,
I think so, yeah.
her firstborn living, son, and that's the natural response of any parent, is to try to, any good parent, not all of them, but to take care of one's, and to assure the place of one's beloved.
Right, right. Yeah, it seems hard to believe that this is just, well, and Nathan went to her, I wonder if she would have confronted David if Nathan hadn't approached her. Again, Bathsheba, kind of passive. And it worked. And it's interesting that a relationship like this that started off so tenuously seemed to become very, very strong between Bathsheba and David. Think about how awful David might have become if he learned there were no consequences for doing that horrible thing. It would have been a very, very different story in the Bible, wouldn't it? And Solomon was declared king. I think that Bathsheba is an example of humanity. She's just a very human person. She's got her strengths, definitely. She's got her weaknesses. She's vulnerable more than anything else, in my mind. She never really complained. You never heard of her complaining, except for in this case, and it was Nathan who prodded her to do that. Maybe she was very stoic, I don't know, but she did trust God, and God blessed her with her son Solomon. And with stability, That wasn't true of all David's wives. So, that's why I thought of her as a risk taker, but maybe I'm wrong.
No, this was a big risk. I mean, she was not invited by David to give him counsel.
Right.
She went in of her own accord, well, with Nathan's,
Yeah,
prodding, but of her own accord.
Yeah.
And that was taking a risk of either dramatic punishment or how dare you tell me your son's going to be the last on the list.
Right. Right.
So.
Sandy?
Solomon wasn't I'm forgetting the story.
Okay.
Solomon was not David's firstborn son then.
Oh, no.
I don't remember, how did Solomon get to be the one that David promised the kingship to?
The other guys rebelled. They attempted coups and died and all that kind of stuff.
So he was kind of like next on the line? That was,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. The last one was Adonijah, who declared himself king, and when he wasn't.
Okay. And at that, so it could have,
I'm looking at Belva. She's my
if
resource.
everybody was, if none of that happened, then somebody else would have been, actually would have been king, not
Right.
Solomon.
Right. And that would have been wrong.
Because God wanted Solomon to be king.
Yeah.
So, what prompted all those other guys to do what they did to eliminate their, how did it end up being Solomon? Like, all those other guys did bad things, whatever, and eliminated their chances, or died. It worked its way down to Solomon.
Right.
Or they were trying to take a shortcut to
Yeah.
be king.
Okay.
I think one of the things too that we're skipping over, but
Yes.
is very, very important, is that David had been told that no, you will not build this temple because you are a man of bloodshed. The man who's going to build this temple will be a man of peace. And Solomon was the only one of the sons who had demonstrated that he was a man of peace.
Good point.
So he was a man after God's own heart.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I can deal with that.
Great. Any other thoughts, questions? We can take a break for 10 minutes? Well, let's start back. So our next risk taker is Esther. Esther. Hadassah. Esther is her Persian name, and it means star, Aster. And it implies good fortune. Hadassah means myrtle, which is what? Flowering tree, right?
Right.
That's her original name. The change of name from Hadassah to Esther may indicate the type of beauty for which she was famous. She's a star, right? Yes.
She also tends to identify more with her adopted culture, which would also be indicative of the name change.
Sure, well, she was the queen, so yeah. Hard not to identify with the culture that you're queen of. The book of Esther is different from the rest of the Bible in that, along with the Song of Solomon, God is not mentioned. God might look like he's hiding himself in this book, but he accomplishes his will. Let's see, she was a woman of clear judgment, magnificent self-control, capable of self-sacrifice. And this is the last woman of the Old Testament.
Courage.
Who is, yeah, courage, exactly. She was related to a family carried away captive with Jeremiah around 600 BC. For some reason, we don't know why, her family decided to stay instead of going back to Jerusalem. And when her parents died, she came under the guardianship of Mordecai, her uncle. He was a palace official, and he had a lot of affection for Esther. He raised her as his own daughter. And Esther was always obedient to her uncle. And even when she became queen, she sought his advice. Now, here's something weird that I learned in my studies this time. The marriage of Ahasuerus to Esther was against Persian law, which said that one of the royal line must marry someone belonging to one of the 7 great Persian families. And she wasn't. Esther didn't reveal that she was Jewish, but it must have been known that she wasn't part of one of those 7 families. So that's kind of different, but she was beautiful. And that's how she became a resident of the palace. And when Queen Vashti was deposed, who is another courageous woman, actually. Yeah?
Well, but it was the 7 princes of Media and Persia that were the ones who suggested that he hold, yeah, that's what it says in verse 14 of chapter 1, that they, and it's probably the same 7 families, that they were the ones who suggested what to do about
the beauty contest?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep. Yep. Keeps going.
Yeah. So Esther was chosen to succeed Queen Vashti, who stood up for herself. And she was a woman of faith, along with her uncle Mordecai. Haman, the chief court favorite, was the Jews' enemy. He was like an Old Testament version of Adolf Hitler. He conceived a plan to massacre the Jews, and he asked, and Mordecai asked Esther to reveal her Jewish nationality to the king, and that courageous action brought about a complete reversal of the decree. Haman was executed. Mordecai was honored by the king. Esther's position as queen was strengthened. Ever since, every year, the book of Esther is read at the Feast of Purim. And she's just the supreme heroine of the Jewish nation who delivers her nation from disaster. She's pretty cool. And her character wasn't corrupted by wealth or prosperity or power. So, doesn't always happen. Power corrupts, I guess. So, what are some of the lessons that we can learn from Esther?
Listen to your relatives.
Speaking truth to power.
Speak truth to power. Yeah, exactly. else? I'm sure there's more.
When God says, leave this place, you should probably follow that advice.
There you go, yeah. the people
None of
would-
this would have happened if they'd been obedient.
Yeah, that's true. If all those people had gone back to Jerusalem. I hadn't thought of that,
Mhm.
but
Well,
yeah.
And somewhere along the line, not this time, but I read that the Haman was actually the one person, the son of the person that hadn't been killed from that line of, I can't remember what,
I know what you mean, yeah. And so he had an extra resentment
yes.
going on because his family had been killed.
Yeah. A
Hmm.
bit like Adolf Hitler with the Jews, because he had been kept out of the good art schools because, by the Jews who owned them.
Oh, yeah. Well, Esther
He
kept
was an
her,
aspiring artist, yeah, as a young man.
Esther kept her promises, you know, she pledged to do this dangerous thing, and she did it.
I like that she had everybody fast and pray for her.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I couldn't hear you, Michael.
I thought it was very cool that she had everybody fast and pray for her
Uh-huh.
before she went in. I think she understood the the horrible place that she was putting herself in.
right. And the power of prayer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
This is where the famous line about, that I've kept in my mind over the years is, well, maybe you were put in this place for such a time as this.
Yeah,
You know,
that
I
is
mean,
such a brilliant thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what Mordecai says to her. And I don't know if she was taking any risks when she went to Mordecai after finding out about the plot against the king, but you notice that they kept that really close relationship going all during the time that she was in the palace.
Yeah, yeah. She still loved him. She still looked up to him. She still asked his advice. Yeah.
I also appreciate God's faithfulness to his people in that, as Ted said, they weren't even supposed to be there.
They were disobedient.
They were disobedient, and yet God still has his chosen people, and his will be done.
Right.
And yeah, so he brought beauty out of ashes for them.
Mm.
Time-wise, do we know where this falls in BC? I mean, who else were contemporaries?
My notes said that it happens between Ezra chapter 6 and 7.
Oh,
So,
my notes say around 600 BC. I don't know if that helps place anything. But it was her family could have returned with Jeremiah.
mhm.
Or yeah, no wait, they were carried away captive. Her family was carried away captive. I'm sorry, that's 600 BC. No, her family decided to remain in Babylon after the captivity, which would have been 70 years later.
Well, I noticed that Daniel didn't go back either. That's why, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I guess they could have been. No, they couldn't
I don't think
Wait,
that
when was
I don't
Ahasuerus?
think that they were contemporaries.
have. No.
But I'm just noticing that when, on the offerings to go back, that there were a lot of people who didn't go back. I mean, including people like Daniel and the other Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I mean, that was another offering, but they didn't go back.
Good point. Yeah, this probably was after. So, yeah, so she didn't, I think we've all said this a couple times, that it takes strength of character for people to still love and remember the people that they belong to, even after they become rich and famous, you know, and getting a lot of power. Yeah, Esther risked death for her people, and that's how she also escaped dying with them. But they didn't know that she was Jewish. So I don't know, if she had just kept quiet, maybe she would have lived, I don't know.
Well, Mordecai implies that. You might save yourself, but
Yeah.
but you're gonna ruin it for everybody else. And he was very clear that the rescue would come from some part. And if she didn't take a part that, you know, then then she and her family might die, while God brought in somebody else from some other place. But
Yeah. One of the things that I've thought about is how tempting it is for me anyway to think, if I had a great opportunity like Esther, then I would really glorify God, right? If I had that kind of opportunity, I just don't have that though. But there are great opportunities to serve God everywhere. Serving God to the limit of your ability, no matter what, I think is what we can learn from Esther. Whether it's a big opportunity or a small one.
Yeah.
it was an opportunity that she did not go looking for
Mm-hmm.
at all, in any kind of way, shape, or form.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, as we talk about risk takers, and I think this is transcendent to gender, if you're faithful to do what God places before you, the big risk is to say no.
Yeah, that's right.
The real risk is to say no. It might be what humans consider a super big deal, but you know, God is in the details, not the devil. And I think we need to realize that. On human terms, yeah, we may be looking at risks very differently. But if we were to say no to, you know, move that matchbook, you know, then we're disobedient.
Yeah. Great.
I think one of the things we can pray for, and I do, is to discover what gift we have that can do that. I'm becoming more and more aware of that. That was the theme of our Daily Bread, if you read that this morning. You know, knowing what you can do and giving those gifts
Cool.
towards
Yeah.
the service of God.
Yeah. I think that Esther also had a good grasp of human nature. I think she did. She wouldn't have been willing to, go in there. She knew that she was loved by the king.
I also appreciated how shrewd she was in having Haman come to the dinner with the king, because if she had not invited Haman,
Right.
it could have been her word against his or whatever. I mean, it was very shrewd to have him at both meals.
Very good. And what Belva said before about enlisting fellow believers in the task, right? Prayer and fasting. Oh, I guess you said that.
That was Linda.
Yeah, that was Glenda.
Yeah.
Prayer and fasting, that,
But
when we've got a big deal, don't be afraid to ask for prayer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I call Ted all the time.
And don't be afraid to ask for advice, because she kept asking advice from the eunuch that was in charge, who trusted. I mean, she, everything that she went in with to first see the king, she had asked the guy who was in charge, what should I take? And she followed his advice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
This is the only book in the Bible that they didn't find in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
That's
Is that
interesting.
right?
I did not know that.
You didn't know that? Yeah.
I did not know that.
Unless they, that's. All the books of the Bible are accounted for of the Old Testament, except for Esther.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And it almost didn't make it into the
Yeah.
Canon.
Because of the-
So maybe it was those guys there didn't like that book. Those guys. The Essenes, right? Yeah.
In my Bible study notes too, there is some sort of contention on whether Esther and Queen Vashti actually existed. So that could be another reason why it wasn't. in
Yeah,
those.
it does read like a novel, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But as we always say, it's truth, whether
Yeah, exactly.
it happened or not. Yeah, it's truth. What is that?
Are the noises in my head bothering you?
Yeah.
moving the piano.
Oh, okay. It's echoing, so it sounds like it's
my
coming.
glasses and my music on the piano.
Yeah.
So later, I guess.
I think it's the one upstairs.
I think we can also learn from this story that there is such a thing as righteous retribution. Haman got what he's deserved when he proposed for other people. And there you have it. Anything else?
It's a great story to read.
It really is. It really is. The next one is Mary. Mary is, of course, the most famous of all women in the Bible. Mother of Jesus. Even better known than Eve, I think. And everyone loves Mary. In popular culture, especially in Catholic-influenced culture, Mary is known for her purity. She's thought of as ever virgin by the Catholics. And in fact, she's known more by the name Virgin Mary than Mary, Mother of Jesus. And yet she had other children, and that's what I put this up here for. Isn't this the carpenter's son? Isn't his mother's name Mary? And aren't his brothers, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas, aren't all his sisters with us? So not so much ever virgin. Just saying. Catholics also believe that Mary was free of original sin. When you hear about the Immaculate Conception, that's not Jesus, that's Mary. She was conceived without sin, according to Pope Pius IX. And he decided that in 1864. I did not realize until the last few years that it was that recent, whole Immaculate Conception thing. It's definitely not biblical. Nobody says anything about Mary's parentage, even in the Bible. There are traditions about the names of her parents, but
It's like three wise men.
Right.
like the three weeks.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, for Protestants like us, everything we know about Mary is from the Bible.
Nothing.
Okay. Everything we know about Mary is from the Bible if we're a Protestant, right? But that's quite a lot. She's an outstanding example of someone who dedicated her life to God. What do we know about her? Well, first of all, we know that Mary was willing. That's the first thing we learn. Gabriel announces that she's chosen by God to be the mother of the Messiah. And she says, do I have this here? Yes. She says, I am the Lord's servant. Mary answered, may your word to me be fulfilled. Now, I am the Lord's servant shows that Mary really understands her Jewish heritage. In Leviticus 25, the Lord describes how Israelites are to treat their slaves, and he tells them that they are never to hold a fellow Israelite as a slave. Why? For the Israelites, quote, for the Israelites belong to me as servants. They are my servants whom I brought out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So every Jewish person is beholden only to God. And then she says, let it be. Remember that Beatles song, Let It
Yep.
Be? And those truly are words of wisdom. I don't understand the song, but I do understand. Let it be to me as you have said. All I know is that the real Mary changed the world by surrendering to Angel Gabriel with those words. And God used her to set loose his power, the good news of the kingdom of God. So Mary's the kind of person whom God unexpectedly chooses to use. She brings no great credentials to the task, right? She's only probably 13 to 15 years old. She lives in the middle of nowhere. She's got nothing on her resume other than her availability and willingness to serve. But that's enough. So God puts her to use in his plan, and he takes her through this process that she has had no training for or preparation for. He simply promises to be with her on the journey, and she responds by saying, I'm willing to be along on the ride. And I like how the angel wants her to know just how favored she is, and that with God's grace behind her, she knows that she can do what God asks. So may your word to me be fulfilled. This is an act of surrender, submission, standing in awe before the holy. And it's the very posture of humility and surrender all of us are called to take before God. Mary's words anticipate Jesus' own prayer in the garden, not my will, but yours be done. And I love what this says about God too, because he didn't do anything against Mary's spoken will, right? Or without her permission. He didn't surprise her with an unexpected pregnancy and say, lucky you, you've been chosen as the vessel. No, Gabriel waited until he received Mary's permission and then he left. So the story goes on, the next verse. At that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town in the hill country of Judea, where she entered Zechariah's home and greeted Elizabeth. So that opens up a bunch of questions for me. Mary hurried to see Elizabeth. Now, again, teenage girl, you have to have your husband or your father's permission to travel, I think. And did she tell her parents about her visitation from an angel before she ran off? Do teenage girls typically travel 80 to 100 miles away from their family by themselves? This would have taken at least a week to travel, probably more. It was, as Luke says here, hill country. So it's not like a walk on your treadmill. I went on a walking tour of the Cotswolds several years ago, and it wore me out to walk that far every day. And I didn't have to carry my luggage, like Mary did. I think about Mary walking on that road, pondering many things in her heart, as she was prone to do.
Do you think she would have gone alone, or would she have had someone go with her, but they just don't mention it?
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible.
And the age difference between the women.
Yeah.
You know, that's, because, I mean, that makes sense, because she's going to be seeking out the godly woman in her family for advice.
And Gabriel had told her,
Yeah.
Elizabeth is in your
Elizabeth
same
is-
position,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
miraculous
Yeah.
pregnancy, so yeah.
Yeah.
How will she break the news to Elizabeth? That might have been going through her head. How will she tell her parents if she hasn't told them? How will Joseph react? What will become of her? Is it possible that she worried about her reputation? I know I would have. Her town was small. It was only like a few hundred people. And everyone would be in everyone else's business, right? We were in a small
I'm pretty
town.
sure she was already married at that point, because the message to Joseph said that he went out and immediately did what the angel told him to do, which was to take Mary as his wife.
Oh,
You're
that was actually my question. Was she married at that point?
I thought that the angel came later to Joseph. He didn't come, he went at the same time as he went to Mary?
Not exactly the same time, but just within a few days, because the only two people that we know for sure knew about her being pregnant was Mary and Joseph, because that's what I'm sorry, I'm going Luke, this is not Luke, this is Luke,
You're in
it's back
Matthew.
Yeah,
Because Matthew talks about Joseph, but
right. And
I don't
and
think
it says-
timing is mentioned here. It says immediately, at that time, Mary got ready and hurried to a town. Don't you think it would have said Mary and Joseph if Joseph had?
Oh, I didn't say that he went with her, I'm just saying that and you were talking about her asking her parents, but I think that based on what the angel told Joseph, Joseph did not, I mean, from the conception and birth of Jesus, when his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, before they came together, she was found to be with child by the Holy Spirit, and Joseph, her husband, being a righteous man, did not want to, we all know that part. And when he had considered this, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child who has been conceived in her. Yes,
So you're assuming that she told him immediately.
right, because she will bear a son, and you shall call his name Jesus.
You're-
Because it says,
You're assuming that Mary told him before she went.
right, and Joseph awoke from his sleep and did as the angel of the Lord commanded, and took Mary as his wife, but kept her a virgin until she gave birth to a son and called his name Jesus. And I understand from something that I read about the Greek that it's immediate.
Yeah, immediately after you heard from the angel, but
Right.
I never heard that before. That that she was married when she went to Elizabeth.
I don't know that she was, but it just makes sense from, it just makes sense from the way that he would have had to, in order to keep it a secret between the two of them.
I don't think it ever was a secret. I think everybody in the town knew.
If everybody in the town knew, then why does all the later chapters about the Sadducees and the Pharisees, why do they all say,
Who's your father?
they all assume, they say, isn't he the son of Joseph?
Oh, no. They also say awful stuff about who is your father. So I think that was not really a secret that she was pregnant when they got married. That's me.
If she got ready and hurried right away, so she's barely pregnant, she goes to see Elizabeth, and I understand she was there about 6 months till Elizabeth had John.
3 months, I think.
3 months? I thought she was with her for 6 months.
I think
No.
she was there for 3
No.
months.
I think Elizabeth was 6 months pregnant when she arrived, wasn't she?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, is that where I got
Yeah, I
that?
think,
yeah.
Okay, she leaves, suddenly leaves, comes back later, now she's pregnant, and she's not married. She's a harlot. She has been labeled for life,
That's exactly right.
and Jesus is a bastard. You know, like that's a label they had to carry there the whole time.
That's why, and I can't find that in the New Testament.
Oh,
Okay.
I think it's even in what we've been talking about in the Gospel of John. They're always asking, who's your father? And
Right, and he's always referring back to his father in heaven.
indeed, but I think that they're referring to who's his father on earth. Because they're being nasty. But
Well, why then in this scripture coming up, do we have the fact that she's going to be called blessed by all people?
she is.
Eventually.
Isn't she called blessed? I bless her.
I don't know how you can slander and call her a harlot at the same time you can call her blessed.
I don't call her a harlot.
Well, they weren't, I'm not calling her a harlot. But I think in those days, in that little village, she was ostracized. I think she had a horrible life
Oh, I don't
at
think
that
so.
point.
I don't think
I think
anybody
her-
but she and Joseph knew.
Yeah, I still think she had a horrible life. She was just put aside, she was ignored, because that's the culture.
Hey, they got a nice vacation in Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah, to get away,
That's
to
right.
calm down the mess.
Well, they went down to Bethlehem. Nobody even knew when the child was born, because by the time they came back from Nazareth, when they got back from Egypt and went up to Nazareth, they didn't know when the child had been born.
Christmas.
Sorry,
December 25th.
I don't think so.
Just ask those 3 wise men.
Well, let's move on.
Yeah. We agreed to disagree.
Yeah. Now, so, again, my point of view, I think that everyone in town would have known. And they would also have known that Mary was a good girl up until then, right? So, I would suspect. But anyway, 12 years later, Mary and Joseph bring Jesus to Jerusalem. And perhaps they bring him every year. We don't know. Men were required to go to the Passover feast, but Mary went too. And they lose and find Jesus in Jerusalem, discovering him discoursing in the temple with the elders. And that was complicated for Mary. Yeah.
That had to have been terrifying for them, because at that time, the size of Jerusalem, population-wise, expanded to over 1.5 million people, making it one of the largest cities on the earth.
Right.
Oh,
And how are you going to find your son?
right.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So by the time they do find him, he's been missing for 3 days.
Yeah.
right.
One day out with the caravan, another day back, and another day looking for him.
Well, plus the old city's a rabbit's warren. I mean, how would you
Yeah.
find anybody?
Yeah. And then they discover Jesus among the teachers in the temple. in that day, it wasn't unusual for students to gather at the feet of rabbis to discuss theology, often in a question and answer format. But even at this young age, Jesus has amazing knowledge of God. And in fact, those listening to him are astonished by his understanding. And I wonder if Mary was, and I suspect she was, his first teacher. After all, she ponders a lot. So she wasn't just the point of Jesus' entry into the world or a channel through which he passed. She was the mother who cared for the physical needs of Jesus the boy, and she nursed him and nurtured him and taught him the ways of the Lord. I have no doubt she was the one who taught him to memorize the Psalms and to pray, even as he grew in wisdom and stature in favor with God and others. So there's that. Then she was with him at the beginning of his ministry in Cana. And she, right after Jesus was baptized, well, after he's in the wilderness for 40 days to be tempted by Satan, and he called his disciples, but he hadn't done any public teaching yet. So he picked up some of his disciples from John the Baptist, and they talked to others of their friends and relatives who began to follow along as well. And Mary was at a wedding in Cana, and Jesus and his disciples were also invited. It looks like they were there separately, not because Mary was following Jesus around. Mary sees that the couple has run out of wine long before the celebration is over, and this would be a real crisis for them, for the host. So she says to Jesus, they've run out of wine. And that was bold. That was bold of her. Jesus has this little almost tussle with his mother. Woman, why do you involve me? My hour has not yet come. And that sounds harsh, but woman is not dismissive. It's like senora here, right? It's just a little formal, more formal than ma. He's pointing out that he is not under her authority. He's under God's authority. But he must have decided this was the right time to do this kind of sign, because then she says to the wine stewards, do whatever he tells you.
Fully God and fully man, and the compassionate side of the man.
Mm-hmm.
And she must have been something in the, she wasn't just anybody there.
Right, she had to have been like maybe a relative or something to
Or-
be able to keep track of stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, she was part of the
Wedding party.
wedding party, yeah, I guess. It
Yeah.
had to have been.
Yeah.
Or the caterer.
Well, she could have been the caterer, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because we don't hear about Joseph at that point, so yeah, she's on her own with their children, you know.
Sorry. So do whatever he tells you. That's best advice out there. follow Mary's advice for Christian living. But we also learn in the Bible that Mary could be wrong. She visited Jesus with his brothers, and it's mentioned in 3 of the 4 Gospels,
Yep.
while he was teaching the multitude. And in Mark's version, they say he's out of his mind. They're trying to protect him probably, but anyway, she was wrong. He was walking right into trouble. I do have this up here, okay. Jesus entered a house, again a crowd gathered, so that he and his disciples were not even able to eat. When his family heard about this, they went to take charge of him, where they said he is out of his mind. So, was Mary worried about him? Was she worried about the shame he might bring on their family by acting crazy? Was this all of the brothers' instigation who brought Mary along?
They did not believe.
Yeah, not at that point. I think Mary did,
Yeah.
but I don't think the brothers did. And then Jesus didn't claim them as family. Yikes. He said, my mother and brothers and sisters are those who hear the word of God and do it. So it does leave you wondering, did Mary lose faith? I mean, she certainly had faith when Jesus was born.
And also with the wine.
Yeah, but did she lose faith when she was searching for him in Jerusalem too? Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I mean, when we encounter a different facet of our Savior that we had not seen before, we get confused. I do. And it's like, God, how do I reconcile you and your character, God, with the pain I am going through in this minute?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it could have been a very similar thing. All of a sudden, she's eclipsed.
Right.
Her brothers are, her sons are eclipsed, and he is rising.
Mm-hmm.
And wait a minute, I wasn't expecting this.
Yeah.
It happens to us all the time.
Right. And maybe she was just being a protective mother,
That's what I was thinking.
worrying about him not eating. You know, who knows?
A good Jewish mother.
A good Jewish mother. I almost said that. Eat.
I made seconds for you.
That is what it says, that he and his disciples were not even able to eat.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, she wanted more control in that situation, right? And that's not, you can't control Jesus. Yeah. She wanted to keep him safe, but safety wasn't his mission. So she looks a little faithless, obedient yet interfering. Sometimes misses the mark, just like the rest of us.
She may have had an idea in her mind, like all the Jews, of when Jesus came, this is what's going to happen.
Right.
And it wasn't happening the way she had been taught it was going to happen. Things weren't going the way she thought or anybody else thought. Oops.
Why aren't you arming us against the Romans? Why are you spending your time healing these people?
Right. Right.
Yeah, you're the king. You're the king.
Yeah.
When, another thing, when Jesus, going back to the wedding, about the wine, and Mary comes to him because it seems like she assumes that Jesus is going to be able to do something about this.
Right.
And when he said, why do you come to me? It's not yet my time. When was his time supposed to be? Had God told him there was a particular time when he was going to reveal him as the miracle person, the Messiah and all that?
I don't know if God revealed to him a specific time.
Because he said, it's not yet my time. It says, why are you bothering me now? This is too soon.
Right. He knew that he had to hold back, because if people saw that he was doing a lot of miracles, they might just rush in and claim him as king, and it wasn't time for that yet.
Uh-huh.
He had to do his ministry.
Yeah.
He had to preach the coming of the kingdom and all that, and he hadn't started yet. So he knew that much.
Yeah.
I don't know that he knew specifically when, but
But she must have known that he could do something about it
yeah,
if he wanted to.
yeah, definitely.
Mary should have known, didn't know. I wonder how did she know?
Well, maybe he had done miracles privately before that. I don't know.
Because it does say public miracles, right? This is his
Yeah.
first public miracle.
Yeah. So, I was saying Mary looks both faithful and faithless, obedient and interfering, someone who sometimes misses the mark. And that's just like the church, right? We're a community that's both the spotless bride of Christ because of God's grace, and at the same time, a company of pilgrim sinners who need to pray for forgiveness on the daily. But ultimately, Mary was faithful, right? She was at the foot of the cross. She heard her son's last words. And when all of the disciples, even Peter, had fled in fear, Mary remained true to Christ and his word. And the sword really did pierce her soul, as was predicted.
Well, that's the worst of inversions. I mean, no parent should ever see their child die, but to have this expectation that of the Messiah, and everybody expected a political, military Messiah, and to see him on the cross, that is quintupling the pain.
Yeah, and yet she was faithful to the very, very end.
Well, she stayed by the cross.
Right,
I mean, where were the disciples, except for
Right.
John,
John.
Yeah.
you know?
And beyond that, she was there at Pentecost. She was there with the apostles. She was one of the first in the upper room after that. So she bridges the Old and New Testaments at Jesus' birth, but also the close of his earthly ministry and the birth of the church. So quite a life. I don't know that anyone else knew Jesus as well during his 30-plus years on earth. She believed. So that speaks to all of us, I think.
Maybe John, the disciple Jesus loved.
Maybe,
Maybe, but yeah.
but she knew him as an infant, you know.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, I don't know that anybody has ever known me better than my mom, right?
Yeah, well, we have different families.
Yeah. So, according to Luke, again, she kept all these things and pondered them in her heart, and she had the heart of a true disciple. And she's the first to say, God, my Savior, making her a true prophet. And she was faithful to the very end of her life, and I would like to be like her. Wow.
And she's probably the one that Luke got the information from.
Got most of his story from, yeah.
Because
exactly.
she was the only one who was there from the beginning of
Right,
that story.
you know, yeah. I don't know about, Jesus' younger brothers being able to tell the story of Jesus getting lost at age 12, but, certainly.
Well, the whole story between her and Joseph, I mean,
Right,
all of that,
right,
that was
So what risks did Mary take?
Which ones did she not? Acquiescing to, what was an implied request.
Right,
She could have resisted,
she could have. I mean,
and she did not.
Zechariah kind of,
Yeah.
he didn't resist, he just was skeptical.
And a 13 to 15-year-old on an 80-mile journey solo,
Yeah,
that's a big deal.
that's a big deal. What else can we learn from Mary? Anything? Perseverance?
So is Mary actually buried in Ephesus?
I don't know.
Well, I've been to her tomb.
Yeah.
She must be there.
Yeah.
Unless you're a Catholic, in which case you went,
Oh, that's
But, no, they say that she went to Ephesus with
John.
John,
Right.
and she died there.
I've
And
been to
there
her
is
house.
a
I
tomb
didn't
there. Of
know
course,
that
it's
was
a
her tomb.
touristy kind of a thing, I guess, but.
but what a mark of faithfulness to John, because he did take her
Oh,
as
yeah.
his mother.
Yeah,
And
he
she did acquiesce, I mean, there's some real beauty there,
Yeah.
because that redefines family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Some of us need that.
Well, and Jesus redefined family all his life. He really did. He really did. That's why we talk about our church as a family, because Jesus did. So, what did you learn about these women from your studies this week? Anything that we haven't touched on already? We clearly know why Mary's story is in the Bible. It would be missing a big chunk if she weren't mentioned.
Each of these women served.
Yeah.
They led, but they led through service. And they led at great cost through the service in which they chose. Those were the risks.
Yeah. It's interesting how leadership and service are intertwined, aren't they?
The other thing that you can add to Mary's, all the, what you were saying at the beginning about all the different attributes that she had, she also had the right lineage.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, she did.
That's right.
Because if she hadn't had the right lineage, she, wouldn't have been considered.
Yeah.
It was a two-pronged lineage.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really important, because the purity is emphasized in the fact that the
Yeah.
lineage was from both sides.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we are pretty sure that Luke's account is the lineage of Mary.
My 9,000th cousin 5 times removed.
Yeah, yeah. She was it. It all worked. God can do it, put everything together perfectly. Go figure. It's amazing. Well, I don't have anything else for y'all except for the homework.
Which we got.
Yeah, and because of my crisis of the soul, wondering about Bathsheba. So I'm like, are the women we discussed today truly mistakers? Maybe there's a better way to characterize them. The midterm paper, if you're taking this class for credit, is due next week. And here are the readings for Sarai, Hannah, and Elizabeth, our barren women, for next week. All right? Thanks, y'all.